The Ark of the Covenant is one of the most recognized objects in religious history, but most people encounter it first through modern storytelling rather than ancient sources. In the biblical tradition, the Ark is not introduced as a treasure to be hunted. It is introduced as a sacred center of covenant life. That distinction matters because it changes the main question from who finds it to what did it mean. The Ark represented a relationship between God and a people, with obligations, memory, and authority bound together in ritual form. It was treated as the holiest object in Israelite worship, linked to divine presence, law, and national identity. The mystery of its fate became powerful partly because its role had been so central. If an ordinary object disappears, history shrugs. If the core symbol of covenant disappears, communities create narratives to process loss, hope, and legitimacy. So before discussing theories about where it went, we need to understand why its function made disappearance such a profound event. The textual descriptions in Exodus present the ark as a crafted chest of acacia wood overlaid with gold, fitted with rings and poles for transport, and topped with a lid framed by cherubim. The lid is often called the mercy seat, and in the biblical imagination it marks the place associated with divine communication. These details are technical, but they are also symbolic. Gold signals sanctity and value, while portability signals that holiness traveled with the people before permanent state institutions formed. The carrying poles are especially important because they imply distance and protocol. This was not an object for casual handling. The ark's design encoded boundaries, and boundaries taught theology. It trained the community to understand that sacred things are not common possessions. Even in visual terms, the ark combines two themes that rarely coexist easily: intimacy and danger. It is near enough to guide collective life, yet restricted enough to resist human control. That tension is central to everything that happens later in the narratives. The contents associated with the ark deepen its meaning. Most central are the tablets of the law, tying the ark to covenant obligations and moral structure. Additional traditions mention Aaron's rod and a pot of manna, which expand the symbolism from law alone to leadership and sustenance. Taken together, these items narrate a complete social theology. A people needs norms, legitimate authority, and daily provision. Whether every item was physically present in every historical phase is debated, but the narrative architecture is clear. The ark is presented as a container of memory that disciplines power. In many ancient societies, authority was justified by force, bloodline, or imperial patronage. In the ark tradition, authority is repeatedly measured against covenant standards. That is why the object had political consequences. It did not merely decorate worship, it grounded claims about who could lead, how justice should be defined, and whether national destiny was tied to ethical obedience. In that sense, the ark functioned like a constitutional symbol in sacred form. The ark's mobility in wilderness and early settlement narratives reflects a formative period before centralized monarchy. It is carried ahead of the people and associated with guidance, yet the texts also surround it with strict rules about handling and distance. Those rules are not random ritualism. They teach that divine presence is not equivalent to tribal possession. You cannot reduce holiness to a portable guarantee of success. This becomes clearer in conflict narratives where leaders attempt to instrumentalize sacred symbols for military advantage. The literary pattern often pushes back. Proximity to the ark does not cancel moral failure. That message is historically important because it preserves a self-critical strand inside national memory. Communities usually remember symbols in flattering ways, but ark traditions frequently include warning episodes. This suggests the tradition was not only preserving prestige but enforcing accountability. So when the ark appears in marches and battles, it should not be read as a magical talisman. It should be read as a test of whether power remains subordinate to covenant ethics. The stories insist that without that order, sacred nearness can become judgment rather than protection. As Israel moved toward monarchy, the ark became entangled with state building. Bringing the ark into Jerusalem under David helped fuse political capital and religious significance. Strategically, this was a brilliant consolidation move. The royal city became not only administrative center but symbolic heart. Yet the texts keep tension alive by preserving episodes of fear, mishandled transport, and ritual caution. Even kings could not normalize sacred power as routine state property. Under Solomon, the Ark is installed in the temple's inner sanctuary, marking a major transition from portable sacred center to fixed architectural center. This shift offered stability, liturgical order, and institutional continuity. But it also introduced new vulnerability. When holiness is geographically centralized, historical shocks to that center become existential. A nomadic ritual system can relocate. A temple-centered system, once destroyed, leaves deeper symbolic rupture. That is exactly the backdrop for later disappearance theories. The Ark's final uncertainty is inseparable from the political theology of centralization. The more singular the symbol becomes, the more destabilizing its absence feels after catastrophe. The major historical rupture is the Babylonian conquest and destruction of Jerusalem's temple. At this point, the record becomes ambiguous. Unlike some cult objects in ancient Near Eastern history that appear clearly in conquest inventories, the Ark does not have a universally accepted external chain of documentation that settles its fate. One straightforward theory is lost through conquest, seized, destroyed, dismantled, or absorbed into imperial spoil systems. This is plausible given known patterns of war and plunder. But plausibility is not proof. Because the evidence is incomplete, alternative memory streams developed. Some suggest protective concealment by temple authorities before the final fall. Others connect concealment to Reform-era leadership or prophetic circles. In trauma contexts, concealment stories serve two functions at once. They can preserve a possible historical memory of emergency action, and they can sustain hope that covenant signs were not fully surrendered to empire. Scholars therefore analyze these traditions with caution, neither accepting every detail uncritically nor dismissing them as meaningless inventions. The absence of consensus is frustrating, but it also exposes how historical method works when sources are layered, selective, and shaped by theological purposes. Among post-biblical claims, the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition stands out for coherence and continuity. It maintains that the Ark, or a singularly sacred equivalent tied to Solomonic legacy, is housed in Aksum under strict guardianship. For adherents, this is not an optional legend but a living religious fact integrated with liturgy and identity. External verification is limited because access is tightly controlled, which creates a structural clash between devotional custody and archaeological expectation. Similar dynamics appear in other communities that preserve Ark-linked memories, including traditions among the Lemba of southern Africa involving ancestral sacred objects and priestly narratives. It is tempting to treat these claims as mere competition for prestige, but that simplification misses their social function. Ark traditions often carry identity under pressure, linking present communities to sacred antiquity through ritual memory. Even when direct historical continuity cannot be demonstrated to modern standards, these narratives reveal how symbols travel and localize across regions. The Ark becomes less a single linear artifact story and more a network of claims about belonging, legitimacy, and divine favor in different historical landscapes. The Ark also expands beyond one tradition through theological reinterpretation. In Christianity, the Ark is frequently read typologically, meaning its significance is fulfilled symbolically in later realities rather than only preserved as an archaeological target. It can signify divine presence, covenant fulfillment, or Marian imagery as bearer of the word. In this frame, physical recovery matters less than theological continuity. Islamic references engage related sacred history motifs in a different textual and interpretive environment, while Bahá'í readings treat Ark symbolism in broader spiritual terms. The key insight is that the Ark's afterlife is plural. Different faiths preserve it for different reasons: ritual continuity, doctrinal symbolism, moral teaching, or eschatological imagination. This plurality complicates simplistic debates that demand one universal criterion of relevance. For one community, authenticity means uninterrupted custodianship. For another, it means faithful interpretation. For another, it means historical plausibility. Recognizing these distinct frameworks helps prevent category errors, where devotional claims are judged only by laboratory standards or historical questions are dissolved into pure symbolism. A serious explainer should map the differences clearly rather than flatten them into generic mystery language. Academic scholarship approaches the Ark through source criticism, comparative religion, archaeology, and history of ideas. Researchers ask when Ark traditions were composed, how they were edited, and what earlier cultic practices might have influenced their form. Comparisons with Egyptian and broader Near Eastern portable shrine traditions are common, not to erase Israelite distinctiveness, but to situate it in a real cultural environment where exchange and adaptation occurred. Another key debate concerns genre. Biblical texts are theological literature, yet they preserve historical memory in patterned ways. The task is not to force them into modern reporting standards, but to identify what kind of historical information they can responsibly yield. That includes ritual structures, institutional tensions, geography of worship, and political theology. Archaeology can illuminate context, but it rarely delivers one-object certainties for high-symbol artifacts with contested custody. This is why scholarship often produces probability maps rather than definitive verdicts. That can feel unsatisfying to audiences trained by documentary finales, but it is methodologically honest. In Ark studies, intellectual integrity means holding strong hypotheses with explicit limits and refusing to market speculation as settled fact. Modern media transformed the Ark into a global icon of dangerous hidden power. That transformation was dramatic, entertaining, and culturally influential, but it also shifted the center of gravity. The ancient question of covenant fidelity was replaced by a modern question of discovery and control. In popular plots, whoever finds the Ark first wins. In biblical logic, misuse of the holy often leads to collapse. This inversion matters because it shapes public intuition about religion and history. Still, popular culture is not purely negative. It kept the Ark alive in collective imagination and invited many viewers to investigate primary traditions. The challenge is to use that curiosity without feeding sensational claims that bypass evidence. Viral theories about guaranteed locations, coded maps, or imminent revelation usually rest on weak sourcing and selective reading. Better storytelling keeps wonder while enforcing standards. Identify source type, separate text from legend, test chronology, and acknowledge uncertainty. When done well, the Ark becomes more interesting, not less. Mystery grounded in disciplined analysis is richer than mystery built on confident fiction because it respects both historical complexity and religious seriousness. So the enduring conclusion is twofold. First, no current claim about the Ark's physical location has achieved broad cross-disciplinary consensus. Second, the Ark's significance does not depend entirely on that consensus. Historically, it anchored Israel's covenant memory, shaped temple theology, and influenced political imagination. Religiously, it became a trans-traditional symbol interpreted through multiple frameworks. Culturally, it evolved into one of the most persistent mysteries in the world. The gap between description and destination is real, and future discoveries could still shift the map, especially if new texts, securely dated finds, or unprecedented custodial transparency emerge. But until then, the most responsible posture is neither cynicism nor credulity. It is disciplined openness, take traditions seriously, test claims rigorously, and admit what remains unresolved. In that approach, the Ark is not reduced to either fantasy relic or solved case file. It remains what it has long been, a powerful meeting point of faith, history, loss, and identity. That is why the question survives every generation, and why the search, even without closure, continues to matter. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.